When Animal House started screening for people in the industry, they had a screening at the Directors Guild Theater. And the word had gotten out that the movie was testing really great in the market research screenings and everything. So various producers either showed up at the screenings or sent representatives to the screenings. And we came out of that screening, and someone was waiting for us, a guy named Don McDonald, who worked for John Peters. John had made this transition from a world-class hairdresser to a big-time movie producer. He had a relationship with Barbra Streisand, and he was just starting to produce big movies. I think he did Oliver Stone's first feature around that time, a movie called The Hand. And he'd done What's Up, Doc, I guess, with Ryan O'Neal and Barbara. And so he sent this guy to talk to us, and this guy set up a meeting for Doug Kenny and I and John. And Doug, we both pitched different ideas. Doug pitched an idea for a comedy set in Tibet when the Red Chinese were attacking the Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, and it was kind of a psychedelic war picture. The Tibetan lamas fought back with flaming prayer wheels they conjured up out of the sky, and it was kind of an acid trip fantasy comedy adventure movie. But John was just baffled by that one. And I had an idea for, at the time, the American Nazi Party was going to march in Skokie, Illinois, which was maybe the largest Jewish suburb in America. And people were so stirred up by this idea in Chicago that the Jewish Defense League was training young Jews to fight the Nazis, and the Nazis were getting terrified because they thought the Israeli terrorists were going to come in and wipe them out when they marched. And national FBI was coming into, everyone was coming into Chicago. Police were upset. The whole community was in turmoil. So I thought this would make a very good dark comedy, real good dark social comedy about race in America. And John liked that idea, so he told it to an executive, Mike Medavoy at Orion Pictures, and John told me that Mike really liked the idea, and I went in for this meeting, and I told the idea again, and Mike said, well, I think, it was so controversial, if one bomb threat on a movie theater and we'd have to shut the movie down the whole country. He said he could never play. So as much as I like it, I really, we can't produce his movie. So John Peters jumps up. I thought this was a reasonable response. John Peters jumps up like he's so offended beyond belief. He said, I can't believe you dragged this man in here. And, you told me this was a deal, and now you embarrass me in front of this man. I can't do business this way. And he storms out of the room, leaving me alone with the president of the studio, who I've never, I don't know the guy. And we're both looking like, what just happened? And neither of us understood it, So he said to me very reasonably, he said, look, if you want to write and direct something, make sure that it's, commercial. Make it urban and contemporary, because I had also pitched a kind of a revisionist Western, an American Western. And so a couple weeks went by, and Brian Murray, my old friend, and Doug Kenny started talking about doing a movie based on their country club experiences. Brian had been a golf caddy, and Doug had worked in a pro shop as a tennis pro. And I had had no experience in country clubs. I was a Jewish kid, always excluded from country clubs. But it was, as a social satire, it was a world that I thought was a good target. So they wanted to do this movie, and I said, well, all right, let's write it together. Doug could produce it, and I would direct it, and Brian could act in it. So I went back to Orion and said, how about this one? And they said, yeah, that's exactly the kind of movie we think you should be doing. So we wrote a script for Caddyshack, and I told John Peters I wanted to direct it, and I remember I was wearing a safari jacket, which at the time was a good outfit for a director, a lot of pockets. And John looked at me and he said, yeah, you look like a director. So that was it, done deal. The jacket and the glasses, I think, is what did it. So we wrote it, and everything was contingent, of course, on them liking the script, and then it was contingent on signing a movie star. We got Chevy Chase involved. Rodney Dangerfield, Ted Knight, and then Bill Murray came in. So it was like a great cast, and it was just clear sailing after that. It was a lot of fun to do, and of course it was a moderately successful movie. So suddenly I had a directing career.